at home with her 5 small children. The phone rings. It's her husband. A welcome call. He had been out of town on a business trip. She answers her phone. Her husband calmly says, skips the highs and hellos, something is going on at the office today. I'll call you when I know more. His wife is confused, but followed the direction, and she continued about her day. In the late afternoon, her Cub Scout troop began to arrive. She felt uneasy about the strange phone call earlier that day, but pushed it to the back of her head. The little Scouts were assembled in the living room of her St. George, Utah home. She was holding her newborn baby in her arms, and she began her lesson, ironically, on how the government was run. Suddenly, she looked out of the window. Several black SUVs began to fill and surround her home. Some of the mothers of the Scouts were trying to pull out of the driveway as they watched in horror. Dozens of men wearing black vests and carrying weapons of all nature began to storm the house. They rushed through the front door. Countless numbers of men began running through the home and yelling and screaming. The little Scout's eyes were scared. They were wide-eyed. The young mother was held at gunpoint while holding her infant child. She kept asking the agencies, the FBI, the IRS, what do you want? What are you looking for? What are you here for? The credit card printing machines. If you haven't guessed by now, that woman was me. At this point, I realized they were on a wild goose chase for something that did not exist. They had obtained a criminal warrant based on the theory that Kyle, my husband at the time, was printing fake MasterCards, when in truth, the MasterCards were contracted and supplying legitimate cards to consumers. The chaos subsided. They realized the search was in vain. They let the little boys leave and confiscated my personal computer and a few of my bank statements. The agencies had also raided the offices where Kyle's call centers were. At the age of 25, he owned and operated a large telemarketing business. He had over 1,000 employees in call centers internationally and nationally. He was hired as a marketer by various companies to do a variety of kinds of work for clients such as GE, AT&T, and Assurant Insurance. The government shut the entire business down on what is called a TRO, a temporary restraining order. Ex parte. This means that the government secretly meets with a judge to tell them they need to shut down your business without any knowledge to the owner or operator. Of course, there are particular instances when this type of enforcement is needed. However, this is a tactic that the Federal Trade Commission uses in almost every instance. The judge agreed to and granted the TRO. At the time, all bank accounts became frozen, all computer documents, bank accounts seized. If you had $1 in your pocket and used it, you could be held in contempt of court. They even seized my 8-year-old son's bank account that held his birthday money and a few dollars of savings. He only recently had it released. He is now 19 years of age. The criminal case was abandoned. However, they had invested many hours and resources into the investigation, so the case was now pursued as a civil matter and turned to the Federal Trade Commission. In the meantime, receivers are a court-appointed, and they're supposed to control and inventory all assets. And this is another and maybe the most criminal part of the entire process. They are hired as an independent consultant. They are supposed to pay your bills and continue to run the business while the court proceedings are in process. With the TRO, a defendant is given a few days to show up in court with an attorney and proof of why your business should continue to run. The government has months to do this and unlimited resources. This is also one of the FTC's very common and effective tactics. They have all your property. There is no possible way to retrieve your emails, documents, contracts, call recordings from the receivers. They dump it into a large storage unit, tell you to make an appointment to meet an agent, and tell you to find what you're looking for in a very limited amount of time. Not to mention, they have also seized all of your attorney's retainer fees, making it impossible to defend oneself. In the end, the FTC confiscated around $8 million in actual assets and money. They liquidated all of our assets before a settlement was ever reached, right down to the bed comforters and the wedding china. This violates the 7th Amendment of due process. They only gave credit for $5 million by decreasing the value of the real estate. The receivership billed and paid themselves over $3 million. A few thousand consumers received some restitution for around $30 per person. What was the actual problem? What was going on to ignite this firestorm? One campaign that was being marketed was a pay-as-you-go card. This was early 2001, right after 9/11. Americans with questionable credit had to obtain a credit card to book any flights, room, etc. They could get this card with a MasterCard logo on it that was contracted by MasterCard, fill it with funds, and use it as we would use a debit card nowadays. The company Kyle was marketing for was not fulfilling this product to the consumers in a timely manner, and there was several complaints to the Better Business Bureau concerning this product. Kyle's company, Lee, had immediately stopped selling the product 6 months before his business was shut down and began to issue refunds. He had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on attorneys to read and approve each and every script that was used. If someone was trying to run a fraud, then why would they spend so much time and effort making sure the program was compliant with the FTC regulations? Kyle settled with the FTC, we moved back to Las Vegas, and started to begin our lives once again. I had our last child, making it 6. I won the title of Mrs. Nevada, United States. Our life seemed to be turning around once more. Kyle's criminal case was originally dropped, but however, an overzealous agent, Bruce Reppert, shopped the case to various districts around the country, Florida, New York, and Texas, but had no luck. 6 years and 10 months later, 2 months before the statute of limitations was over, Bruce Reppert found a judge in the district of the East St. Louis who would hear the case. Mr. Reppert indicted Kyle without ever speaking to him, but previously indicted a man named Peter Purcelli. He owned the company that was supposed to be fulfilling the product Kyle was marketing for. Peter was found guilty on various fraud charges and was serving a 25-year sentence. However, the prosecutor, Mr. Reppert, made a deal with Peter. Peter testified that Kyle was the mastermind behind this scam. He gave testimony that in a lunch, Kyle was clear that this scheme was a sure thing and that he was the mastermind. Mr. Purcelli was given a 13-year reduction based on his testimony that would ultimately lead to Kyle's conviction. We felt that we had a good chance of winning the trial, even though statistics show that against the federal government, you have a 1% chance of prevailing. It cost our families over $1 million to get to trial. The trial was in the District of East St. Louis. There was a jury and 12 witnesses for the prosecution. They were asked to recall a phone call that took place over 8 years before. The FTC told them what to say. Interestingly enough, we have recordings of each witness from those phone calls. Every single one except for one understood what they were getting, and most had already received a refund for their purchase. Our attorneys asked the Federal Trade Commission to approve our scripts on many occasions. However, this is against Federal Trade Commission policy. But after a company is making millions of dollars off of a product, it is not against policy for the FTC to lie, cheat, and steal to get their hands on the monies earned. Many government agencies had held our evidence at some point. They had tampered with hard drives, lost over 1 million documents, and threatened witnesses. Some of the witnesses changed their stories while on the stand, many saying they were so scared that they didn't know what to do and they just did what the feds told them to do. Then they were threatened with perjury while on the stand. The trial was a mess. The multifaceted case was confusing for the most savvy of businessmen, to say the least. It was difficult to understand, and the jury had very little knowledge about this type of business as well. The jury form was also complicated, another tactic used to manipulate the trial and the outcome. Kyle was found guilty on 1 count of mail fraud and 12 counts of wire fraud. He was taken that day. My children never saw their father outside of prison again. A ghost jury, hired independently by either side, found him not guilty. He was not allowed to come home before sentencing. The judge followed strict federal sentencing guidelines and gave him 29 and a half years, a life sentence. I went home with my 6 children and began to pick up the pieces. Kyle had started an internet marketing business before he left for his trial. I was the owner. I came home after the conviction and sat down with the main people running the company. Many of the people that from our former company had followed us. After going through what we had all just endured, they confirmed that our daily operations were running squeaky clean. There was even a full-time employee that updated FTC regulations daily. The company ran smoothly for about a year and a half. I never ran the business and was rarely there. How many of you guys have children or grandchildren? I was in way over my head trying to manage the kids, their activities, and their daily routines. I was trying to hold my family together. The children were in mourning after they had lost their father. It took family, friends, and members of my church and community just to stay afloat. Under these circumstances, I had no way of running a business or experiencing to do so. July 2009. My children and I are visiting our family in Hawaii. My phone rang. This is Rob Evans and Associates, the receivers. We have frozen your assets. Again, deja vu. The world around me began to spin. It was happening again. I left the kids in Hawaii with all of my assets frozen once again. A family member had to pay a retainer fee to find me an attorney for $30,000. The government claimed that the company was marketing software that people could use and find government grants, that these were fraudulent claims, that the government grants and offers don't even exist. Completely untrue. There are many books offered on Google about this topic, as well as a list on President Obama's website of a list of available government grants to the public. I showed up in court the next day to the surprise of the federal agent who would not speak to me the day before and who abruptly hung up on me. Several of my employees were also charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. The FTC claimed that our terms and conditions button were a few pixels off in proximity to the actual terms and conditions. This is also completely untrue. I sat down with my attorney and 2 FTC agents in a never-ending deposition. The federal agents asked me, "How in the world did you afford a Rolls-Royce of an attorney? We have all your assets frozen." My attorney chimed in, "You don't worry about my billable hours." He never took another dime from me, even though his fees were around $510 an hour, and I estimated that he gave over $500,000 worth of work. I couldn't believe the line of questioning I was handed. At one point, I told the feds, "You should write novels because you come up with the craziest ideas and stories that I have ever heard in my life." After the depo, it was clear that I had nothing to do with the business and my hands were clean. But the business was shot, all my assets frozen once again, and the receivers making big money off of my family one more time. I was an easy target. This time they took my brother's 1967 Camaro that was in my possession, all jewelry, cash, guns, IRS tax returns, even my son's piano. The year before, he left for college as a piano major. The assets were all liquidated well before I had reached a settlement. I had to settle. I had no way to fight. I had no way to support my family. I was an easy target, a group of unelected bureaucrats who write their own rules and regulations with zero accountability that aren't even approved by Congress. The regulations are vague and ever-changing. I settled in November and had to start over again. I was forced to sign a ban prohibiting my ability to provide for my family. I cannot work where there are phones, credit card machines, where vitamins or supplements are sold, give testimonials, just to name a few, even though I admitted to no wrongdoing or guilt whatsoever and never had a trial. The day after the settlement was signed, the press release was given by the Federal Trade Commissions. Headlines screamed across the country and internationally. Former Mrs. Nevada, Queen of Fraud, the female Bernie Madoff, the Queen of of fraud scams thousands of Americans. I was immediately contacted by Good Morning America, Inside Edition, George Knapp, Anderson Cooper, and Dr. Phil. After over a decade of federal bullying, not only had the Federal Trade Commission destroyed my family, frozen my parents' accounts, taken all that I had, right down to my home, car, and furniture, they had now planted horrible seeds to the media and all of the world that I was the mastermind of fraud, a well-oiled machine of scams, and a Mormon mother con artist. I appeared on the Dr. Phil show. After weeks of interviewing and background checks, he cleared me and said I was clean and that this was the worst case of character defamation that his experts had ever seen. Who else has been bullied by the Federal Trade Commission? Well, Dr. Phil himself. He settled for $10.5 million on some vitamins that he was selling. And in his statement released by the Federal Trade Commission said that some consumers may have been reimbursed. Google's been sued, Palm Juices, Skechers, and most recently, Aaron Swartz, internet pioneer who faced 3 decades in prison on hacking charges for downloading too many free academic journals. He was bullied for over 2 years, committed suicide last month at the age of 26 because of the constant threats made to him by federal agents. His alleged crime had 0 victims. iWorks, Jeremy Johnson, is facing prison time in an ongoing case that resembles mine exactly. He is fighting, but has been recently told that he can't speak to the media, a clear violation of his First Amendment rights. The FTC has threatened his family's employees and even consumers. The FTC started in the early 1900s to prevent unfair methods of competition between trades. In the 1960s, the agency went from unorganized and toothless to tyrannical in the 1980s. And now today, the FTC is an ever-growing monster that self-feeds on many reputable businesses in the name of consumer protection. However, when did it become a government agency's job to protect the people from their own choices and good judgment? They are policing us, but who is policing them? I do not claim to be an expert on the all-consuming powers of the federal agencies or their regulations. I have learned that unless you or someone you know have been a target of the federal investigation, you might not want to hear about this, and you would probably tend to believe what the government or media might say about someone or someone's business. It is through my over a decade of constant harassment and illegal tactics that I know these things to be true, and that they happen to good people every day at an ever-increasing speed. As of now, my children and I are living with family members. We're collecting a government assistance to feed my family. Finding employment has been extremely difficult due to the negative and untrue media concerning me in this case. Every job I apply for, they say, we can't hire you, we Googled you, but wow, what a story. I feel it's my obligation and to speak out against these tactics, and I just ask that you can contact your congressman and ask for audits on these agencies, any of them, FTC, any acronym basically, FTC, the FBI, the alphabet, the everything. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Juliette. I'm so sorry.